Welcome back to the Wirex Podcast. I'm your host, Lianna Adams. Today, we're joined by Jarod Koopman, Executive Director of Cyber and Forensic Services at the IRS. In this episode, we talk about how the IRS investigates crypto-related crime, from tracking suspicious transactions to uncovering money laundering schemes. Welcome, Jarod.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
So I guess, let's start with, what does your day-to-day really look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. In our line of work, I think that can vary from pretty drastic to, a mundane day of reviewing records to, being out on the street, actually issuing search and arrest warrants against criminals. So really there's no one single day-to-day activity, but it's always interesting because we're able to, offer our own kind of perspective and our own direction in the investigation. It's almost like we're our own business owners in a sense that we take control of that investigation, and wherever that investigation leads is where we tend to go. Like I mentioned, some days it might be interviewing witnesses and out in the field doing surveillance. To the next day of, next week of reviewing bank records or exchange records or issuing a warrant that then maybe creates additional work for us to review the documents that are seized. We also have the digital component, which we'll get into in a minute, but certainly there's a lot to unravel as it comes to, the digital evidence and those things that we're trying to uncover in an investigation. Those breadcrumbs, so to speak, that you're looking for in a criminal case. So yeah, really, it's an interesting job in a sense that no one day is alike, and it keeps you motivated and interested in what we're doing.
Yeah, and I can imagine that you've got a huge team to work with as well, right? That's pretty wide-ranging, I'd say.
Yeah. We have our team at IRSCI. We're a small agency. We're only about shy of 3,000 employees, of which about 2,000 are special agents that investigate crimes, financial crimes, and of that, a small group are cyber agents or cyber investigators. That team is a mixed personnel. We have kind of different specialties that folks are brought on to do. We have our digital forensics. We have our computer scientists and data scientists. We have investigators. We have open source intelligence officers. So we have these specialized skill sets that are brought together under kind of one umbrella that we call cyber and forensics. And that tends to be a consolidation of personnel that have these certifications, they have these backgrounds, they have these specialized skill sets in those areas, which when you bring them all together creates a very good team, a very effective team that can go after, these criminal enterprises. And then over the years, we've really developed more of a niche in the cryptocurrency digital asset space, and really understanding that from an investigative whole of government approach.
Wow, so small team, he says. What are some of the most common tactics financial criminals use to hide money today, and how have they evolved in the digital age?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the most common tactics, and it's existed for many years, probably 100 years now, is the idea of concealment, right? This idea of laundering funds and concealing the transactions in a manner that make it appear to be challenging for, or appear to be legitimate and challenging for law enforcement to uncover. So our job as investigators, and specifically within IRSCI around financial crimes, is piecing that trail, that money trail, those financial transactions back in place so that we can identify what's actually going on. And that's only advanced over that past 100 years. You used to have years ago, it was a bank account to a bank account. Then it was a bank account to international corresponding accounts. And then it was, hiding money in offshore accounts and different structures. And then certainly today, where we've evolved in the last decade to, the digital asset arena and being able to take advantage of all things that are now, digitally integrated across the world in matter of seconds, and very complex structures. You start talking about mixing services or decentralized finance and decentralized exchanges, to hosting services, to exchanges that are in different countries. That provides a huge benefit to criminals and a big challenge for law enforcement to do our job to uncover those.
Yeah, I can imagine that, sure, it might have taken a little bit longer before. And now with the digital age, it's got its own level of complexities, right? And in crypto cases, what's usually the weakest link that leads to someone getting caught? I mean, if you can
Yeah.
get into that.
Yeah, I think it's a false sense of security. Or we've seen this for many years in the fact that criminals think that digital assets and crypto are completely anonymous, which they are not. They're pseudo anonymous, which provides some visibility in terms of the public blockchains and some of the transactional details. But at the same time, it does create some anonymity in a sense of, it's not a name on a bank account. It's a alphanumeric character, wallet address. But I think the weakest link is what is the best aspect for the criminals, which is the digital component, is also the weakest link, because there are so many digital footprints, breadcrumbs, things that we can follow up with, that we just are trying to find that one mistake, that one visible identifier that we might be able to unravel, what's going on or who's behind the transaction. And there's a lot out there. Every time you conduct a transaction, every time you're online, every time you do searches, every time you do some type of activity, that's captured somewhere, it flows somewhere. So it's our job to kind of unravel that, find those small digital footprints that we might be able to pull on, to be able to uncover the actual crime. Additionally, I think there's, like I said, there's this false sense of security from the criminals, thinking that anything they do online, especially when it's global in nature, is not going to be uncovered, but also not going to have some type of action against them because of the global integration. We have this outstanding capability to work with our partners across the globe to really go after those folks. So I think, it's a combination of false sense of security as well as the available digital data that exists to be able to find those folks.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of like there were a couple of times people who kind of robbed other people, right? And but they made the mistake of putting that on Instagram. It just reminds me a little bit of that. When they were just like really silly and just showed off on Instagram, and yep, that's how they got caught.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Social media is a whole nother animal. And certain
right.
criminals are, like I said, going back to the false sense of security, they're also very boastful and are folks that want to be in the spotlight a lot of times. So yeah, to your point, a lot of times they're flaunting their criminal enterprises. Or, brings up another good point, is that a lot of times criminals do this obviously for the monetary gain. And then certainly they are out buying luxurious homes and cars and yachts and things that are very flashy, which draws a lot of attention to themselves. And without having legitimate source of income, it certainly lends itself to very big red flags that law enforcement can look at.
Yeah, and we're seeing a surge in stablecoin use, right? Do these offer criminals a safer way to move money under the radar, or is that a misconception?
Yeah, a bit more of a misconception. I think when you say safer, I think it's safer from their business standpoint. Because one thing to remember is that criminals still are business savvy, right? They do this and they have organized. That's why we call it organized crime, right? These enterprises are very, very well oiled machines that that have launderers to, to the money mules, to the folks that are setting up some of the operations. And when they do that, they are thinking about bottom line. So for the years prior, the past decade, we've seen a lot of acceptance of high fees when it comes to not only like mixing and tumbling services to just the actual cash out process, and having to pay high percentage fees on your money. I think, and all at the same time having a very volatile asset, right? So digital assets can fluctuate in value very quickly, both up and down. So I think we've seen this shift to stablecoin use, primarily for more stability in the criminal organized crime enterprises. They see it as backed by an asset that can be usually pegged close to that stable dollar or whatever the asset is, which provides a little bit more less volatility as they do their business. Additionally, the fact that it's actually a tokenized asset versus other cryptocurrencies. Tokens have certainly accelerated the use cases over the last several years. Decentralized finance, smart contracts in general offer a ton of financial products, whether it's liquidity pools and other aspects. You can now do a lot more staking and liquidity use in these platforms that allow you to not only sit on the funds, but also make them work for you to at least generate some percentage or yield. Which I think for criminals, they, again, going back to the idea that they're running a business, they look at it as it's safer, less volatile, and I can use it in a lot more transacting aspects than I had in the past. So I think from that sense, it's safer for them. However, that misconception that, again, that this is anonymous and can't be tracked, I think it's especially with tokens, it's the new development area of digital assets with DeFi and smart contracts. But certainly there's a lot of law enforcement agencies that are looking at these transactions, including us.
Yeah, I still remember, when we were at the same conference together and you were speaking. I still remember, the last phrase that you gave the audience, like, "We know who you are." I really love that.
It may take us a little while, but we'll find you.
But we'll find you. Exactly. There's a lot of talk about AI in finance. Is AI playing a role in crime as well, or are we, just not there yet?
Yeah, unfortunately it is. AI has accelerated the criminal space pretty drastically, I think, in a couple different ways. First, you have AI and just the volume of which criminals can now exploit and attack different vectors. It used to be that you had to have somebody behind a keyboard who's actually physically sending out, a bot or some type of a virus or, something out to networks and machines and servers. And now that can all be scripted and be done at scale, which just puts higher volume chances of success and more, infiltrated systems and networks by the criminals. Now, that being said, as AI usage increases by criminals, the AI use by law enforcement also increases, albeit we always play a little bit at catch up, but the AI combating the AI aspects from the criminals is also interplayed there. So we are seeing good things being done with AI to help, kind of stop and prevent some of these criminal activities. The other big thing AI is doing is really complicating some of the complexities of certain frauds. So you have things like social media attacks, account takeovers, pig butchering, child exploitation, these type of crimes that used to have a very one-to-one personal interaction is now, again, done at scale and more voluminous, but also brings in elements of generated photos and videos. So it may not actually be a real person that's actually being exploited, but it may be an AI generated photo or video of a child, but it's not a real person, that is then being circulated as a exploitation video or CSAM, sexual abuse material. Brings up a lot of challenges. It brings up challenges in the legal space, like who's actually the victim? Is there a victim? How should this be prosecuted? A lot of countries have taken certain stances, the US being one, that's still, illegal in nature, and that we will continue to go after those type of crimes. Yet there's a lot of other, components at play across the globe. And then certainly, I mentioned the use of like pig butchering and other components where, again, they used to have to use either trafficked individuals or others to reach out to personnel to keep them on the hook for investment fraud or these schemes. However, now a lot of that can be done via AI in generating a video image. They can be voiceover controlled, where they can actually sound like however they want them to be dictated, and then be able to like have these very sophisticated schemes where you're actually talking with an AI generated video. It's just insane, the level of complexity that's being generated.
Wow. I mean, it's in a way it's a little bit scary to think, but then at the same time, I think this is why we should really cultivate using AI for good, right? I just wanted to circle back to something you said earlier on about international network. Can you explain how international law enforcement collaborates on tracking assets across jurisdictions?
Yeah, sure. So I think, I think this is a huge area that's been expanded on over the past really 5 to 7 years, more than ever before. I mean, we've always had really good working relationships across the globe with our international partners. However, I think digital assets and the cyber space in general has accelerated that to different levels. It's brought us closer and really cut down a lot of those barriers, in a sense that you can't find and work these criminal cases without the coordination of other law enforcement agencies across the globe. Almost every crypto, digital asset, cyber case that we work touches into some other jurisdiction in the world. So it's a necessity that we have to work together, and we've done a great job of partnering. We actually, the IRSCI has about a dozen international posts across the world. So we have actual agents and analysts that sit in certain countries that really act as a force multiplier, but there are countries that we've identified as like the biggest bang for our buck, in sense that there's a lot of law enforcement coordination that happens there. They have like task forces that sit together of folks that are actually working these type of cases and going after criminal enterprises. And then in addition to that, we have a lot of ongoing projects like the J5, which is the Joint Chiefs of Tax Administration, as well as some other dark web and other task forces that are being operated in different jurisdictions that we participate on. And those all, again, identify biggest players that are having the most impact to global crime, and then attacking that from the same sense. And I think, I know I've mentioned this on many podcasts, but you hear cybercrime as a service thrown around a lot. And, I always come back at this enforcement as a service model, and something that I coined years ago, that this idea that enforcement has to happen kind of also as a service as well across the globe. So, IRSCI, very good at digital asset tracing. The Germans, the BKA, are very good at dark web marketplaces and monitoring. You have other pockets across the world that have these very good specialized skill sets of data and analysts and agents that we can tap into and use it more as this kind of holistic view or holistic attack by the global law enforcement groups.
Yeah, I really love that, enforcement as a service, right? Because, we do need to hold people accountable. and to really, just to make this place a safer space, right? Um, is there a common psychological trait or pattern you've seen among individuals committing large-scale financial crimes? I'd be curious to know.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you have some common traits. I think you see folks that a lot of them are very intelligent. Some I've even during debriefs or proffers with individuals, they could be in a legitimate industry and probably do very well and make a substantial amount of money just doing legitimate work. I think a lot of times. Folks are kind of under this mindset that they can make more, they can get rich quick. It's kind of that they want immediate fortune, fame, whatever it may be, but they chase that immediate action. I also think there's a little bit of some folks we've come across that there's this false sense that they can't ever be caught. They can't be. They're always going to get away with whatever they're doing, and they feel like they're smarter than everybody else that they're fighting up against. We've seen it in several of the cases we've done that they take these very elaborate schemes, and I think they truly believe that they're going to get away with it. And that's kind of one of that false sense of security again. Other than that, I mean, we see different traits in different cases. I mean, some people do it for the financial motivation. Others are doing it because maybe they're in a bad place financially or mentally and are doing different things. And certainly there's different crimes that we've mentioned today. I mean, you have the investment fraud, and then you have child abuse, sexual abuse material, which are two very drastically different components. Sometimes they overlap and have kind of connecting components, but those mindsets and psychological traits can be very different from a pattern.
Yeah, and they feel like they're above the law, right?
Yeah.
And yeah. Oh, so what do TV shows and movies get wrong about financial crime and the IRS ability to track it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, I think first off, in TV shows, you don't really hear about IRS and us tracking financial fraud. You know, although we're probably one of the biggest players in this space. 100% of our investigative time is focused on financial fraud, and we have the highest prosecutorial percentage across all of government in history. I think you often see some of the larger agencies kind of highlighted in the media and television. It's always the FBI or Homeland Security. They have a much better, I think, marketing ploy, right, than highlighting IRS. And tends to be IRS is also associated more with the tax aspect, the tax authority, the larger agency that does that important job of collecting tax for the American public. So, I mean, our small division, our criminal division that's working these financial fraud cases tends to be very much in the background. You'll rarely see us in a TV show, and usually it's in a fashion that they misconceive us as the tax guys that do not have badges and guns and do warrants and track the criminals, but rather the people that are just kind of looking at data and financial records. So the misconception, being that we do all of that. We go through the same training as the other federal law enforcement agencies. We issue all of our own warrants and work beside them on these cases, doing undercovers and surveillance. So it's often one of those things where people hear kind of what we do, and then they look at me, sideways, saying, "You guys do that type of stuff, at the IRS?" And it's one of those things that I have to kind of explain what our job entails and start from point one. And then the other big thing is that they get wrong a lot of times, and this is more for TV and holding interest, but the amount of time that it takes to work a criminal case could be anywhere from 6 months to 2 years, depending on the complexity and the financial components and the international components, and having to get records from foreign countries and subpoenaing exchanges. So a lot of times you'll see TV shows and movies, they solve the crime within, 24 hours or a week. That's highly unlikely from our standpoint. We have worked some very fast cases, and granted, those cases had big evidence and things that we could easily track or uncover. But still, they would have taken, months in order to really fully adjudicate.
Well, I think it's time to have a word with Netflix, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
What's the most creative but failed attempt at hiding assets you've ever seen?
Yeah, that's another good one. Yeah, I think two come to mind. I think one would be probably the largest the crypto hack ever, which was the Bitfinex investigation. In that case, they did a very elaborate scheme to steal the Bitcoin, but then ultimately the laundering component kind of failed, in a sense that they were very rudimentary in their attempts to just kind of transfer it through exchanges to, prepaid access cards and other debit cards. And then ultimately the bulk of the crypto that was actually still sitting in wallets, we were able to seize, because we were able to identify and find the private keys that were backed up to the cloud. And so, as smart as these folks are, they always make these very simple mistakes of, backing up the private keys, or doing something that makes our job a lot easier. So it's just a matter of uncovering it and finding it. The other one that I really think of that was one of the ones that still shocks me, was one of the very early Silk Road spinoff cases, was a criminal that stole a significant amount of money. It ended up being tens of thousands of Bitcoin, which was $1 billion at the time that we seized it. But in this investigation, they stole the Bitcoin back in the 2014 timeframe, and sat on that Bitcoin in their wallet address, never moving, for 7 years. So for 7 years, we just kind of flagged the account and kind of forgot about it, like just to kind of constantly monitor it. And then sure enough, in 2021, they started making some transactional moves, shifting the money, which was really funny, because 7 years is also the time for kind of jurisdiction for statutory charging. So if you have a crime, you can charge it within 7 years. But that doesn't always, it's not that simple, because when you do another transaction like moving the money, it resets the clock. So I think they were either thinking the 7 years was past the statute of limitations, or they just coincidentally waited that amount of time and then started shifting the money. But credit to our agents, because the same case agent that was working the case back in 14 and 15 and involved in our very early cybercrime units was still working in that unit, and is still to this day. Got a hit on that money transaction moving 7 years later, and immediately went after it. And we ended up finding the individual and prosecuting them, and they ended up ultimately pleading guilty and transferring over the $1 billion to our government. So a win for us, but always funny to see the mindset on some of these folks and what they think they're going to end up getting away with.
I know, and pride comes before the fall, right? Comes to mind, and yeah, I suppose you've got to have huge patience as well, for things like this, and just to really sit and observe. And in the minute they move, it's like, ha, gotcha.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's it's one of those things that it's also the patience in a sense that there is so much work to be done across the world and everywhere to stop some of these criminal acts that, we can't get them all. So it's, some we have at different stages, and this one being an extreme, certainly, but sitting on something for 7 years, it's identifying that, okay, if this ever moves, we will re-engage with it. But at the time, there's so many other things that we can pivot and put our resources and our minds towards.
And also, I suppose, yes, 7 years. That's also a really long time, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's amazing. And I guess you've also got to, in that time, keep yourselves up to date with the latest technology, latest, just the latest trends, right? It's fascinating. If someone listening to this podcast is currently trying to hide funds in crypto, what's your message to them?
Yeah,
I
don't
see
do
you.
it. No, I think you hit on it earlier. I mean, I think we'll find you. Our job is to stay persistent. We have a team of very, very dedicated and smart investigators that are very persistent, and they love a challenge of trying to outwit and outsmart these criminals, and they take that to heart to really make sure that we're going after the most egregious players in this space. And I think you brought up a good point just in this past comment, is that you have to stay up to date on the technology and the advancements, and that's one of the things that we pride ourselves on, and that's making sure that we are advancing as the technology advances. And the message to kind of folks that are potentially in this space doing this type of illegal transaction is that we are kind of staying up to date. And it used to be that, we were always a step behind, and we try to engage industry, we try to engage academia, and we're trying to look at like the future and the space that where this direction of cybercrime, of digital assets, and where it's going in the future, to the extent that we were in DeFi, we were in smart contract analysis years ago, before it's really started to pick up and explode. We've been doing tokenized tracing. We've been doing work in the metaverse and places that dealing with AI for years. Deep fakes. I was talking to folks in 2020 about deep fake technology. So, I mean, the stuff that appears new in a global sense is not new to us. It's just kind of being exploited more at a grand scale, and we are continuing to advance to make sure that we can be one step ahead, or at least on par with some of the work that these criminals are undertaking.
Yeah, and I suppose it's you're also futurist, right? To a certain extent, being able to spot the trends before they become trendy, and yeah, to all
Yeah,
those.
absolutely right.
Yeah, and if you're thinking about being in going against the law, don't do it. Jared's gonna come and get you.
That's right.
Oh man, that's it for today's episode. Jarod, thank you so much for joining us and giving us a clear look at how the IRS approaches crypto investigations and what really goes on behind the scenes. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to follow and share the Wirex podcast. We will be back soon with more insights from the world of crypto, finance, and tech. Thanks for listening.